Hey everyone, welcome to Myo Development. Thank you so much for choosing to work with the Myo armband. I honestly think this product is going to blow your mind. My name is Goodine. I'm a developer evangelist here at Thalmic Labs. You can get a hold of me at my Twitter handle or at my email, chris@thalmic.com. If you have any questions throughout the day, make sure you reach out. In this video, I want to help you get started developing with the Myo. To do so, go to myo.com/start. Right here, you're going to be taken to our initial start page. In front of you, you should have your Myo armband, you should have a USB cable, and you should have a Bluetooth adapter. For those of you who have slender arms, make sure you check out these Myo sizing clips. You can put these clips between the pods on the Myo armband to tighten up the fit. The next step is to download Myo Connect. Scroll down to the bottom of the screen where you'll see links for Windows and Mac. I'm running a Mac right now, so I'm going to go ahead and download this version. I'm going to save that to my documents. And once that downloads, I'll go ahead and run that application. Once the download is complete, I'm going to go ahead and drop Myo Connect into the applications folder. I'm going to replace the old one just to make sure I have the most up-to-date copy. And then I'm going to go ahead and find Myo Connect. Once I find that, I'm going to go ahead and run it. And open. When I first run Myo Connect, you're going to see this Getting Started guide open up automatically. You're also going to see this little Myo armband icon in your taskbar. The Getting Started guide only opens up the very first time you run Myo Connect. After you complete the setup process, when you run Myo Connect thereafter, it's just going to bring up this icon in the top here. All right, let's get started. So first off, Myo Connect asks us to plug everything in. So let's start with the Bluetooth adapter. I'm going to plug that in to my USB port there. You'll see this green check bar came up. That tells me that it's recognized properly. Next, I'm going to plug in the Myo with the USB cable. I'm going to pull down that little plastic rubber flap there, and I'm going to plug in the USB adapter. Once that plugs in, you should see that green check mark light up within a few seconds, and there we go. After I continue, now I have the chance to name my armband. I'm going to go ahead and name that Chris Goodine. Go from there. Next step is to actually unplug the Myo from your PC. You'll get a green check mark as soon as that happens. And then we're going to put on the Myo onto our arm. So try to put the Myo on the thickest part of your forearm. This is usually a couple inches below your elbow. This area has the largest muscle mass, which means we have the largest electrical signals to work with. So you usually get the best recording in that placement. Next step is to perform the sync gesture. So the sync gesture is really important. This basically is a reference that we use to classify hand gestures. If you do this gesture improperly, chances are you're going to have issues with the recognition. So to do that, you want to take your arm, just like this image here, wave your wrist out first, and then gently wave out your arm to the outwards direction. I'm wearing the armband on my right arm, and it detected that right there. Just for practice, we're going to do the sync gesture one more time, so I'm going to do it again. And there we go. Now we're calibrated. The Myo, after doing the sync gesture, can recognize all gestures that's supported by the SDK. So the first one is the double tap. We use this as an unlock. You simply take your thumb and you double tap your middle finger or your index finger or your ring finger. You do that twice very quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and double tap, and just like that, I get that check mark there. It tells me that it read it successfully. The next gesture that we recognize is the spread fingers. So simply spread your hand and it should recognize just like that. Next one is wave right. Simply wave to the right, wave left, and then finally make a fist. So now we're in this sort of playground area. Now you can kind of play around with the various gestures. Go ahead and try them and make sure that they work for you. If you are having issues at this stage, you want to take off the armband and replace it back on your arm and redo the sync gesture. After you do a sync gesture properly, you should see better performance. If you're really having issues, it might have something to do with the fact that you're in a colder climate and you may have dry skin. We started to know this now that we've entered the winter months up in northern Canada. So if that is the case for you, you may want to wear the Myo for a couple minutes before trying again. This will allow your body to produce a little bit of sweat, which will help with the contact. All right, so once we're done that, we can go ahead and try some of these applications. The very first one is simulating music control using the Myo. So if you're working, you don't want to actually trigger your music unless it's intentional. So what you do is you simply double tap to unlock, and that checks off the unlock icon there, and then you spread your fingers. Next, you wave to the right, change tracks, and finally, you can go back using wave left. We're just going to go ahead and pause that by spreading our fingers again. Next, it asks us to double tap and wave right to advance to the next screen. And now we're kind of simulating a thermostat. So here, we want to double tap, make a fist, and hold on to that fist. Now you can practice combining gestures and motion. So by holding onto this fist, I can rotate my arm to the right, I can go back to the left, and I can go all the way past 72 degrees Fahrenheit to advance to the next screen. Finally, we double tap and spread our fingers, and we finish the Getting Started guide. This takes us to the Myo Market, which we'll explain later. So before going into the Myo Market, I want to first explore the Thalmic developer portal. So this portal has all the resources you need for Myo development. You can see here we have Getting Started links. We also have documentation. This is very thorough documentation for Windows and Mac, Android and iOS. And finally, we have our downloads page right here. If you go ahead and click on the downloads page, this is where you're going to see the most up-to-date versions of Myo Connect for Windows, Mac, iOS, Android. You're also going to see the SDKs here as well as the firmware downloads. So I'm working with a Mac. I want to go ahead and download the Mac SDK from here. And I'll go ahead and I'll save that there. One thing that I wanted to mention really quickly before we go on is this Unity package down here. So within the Windows and the Mac SDK, we have a Unity package. So you can simply import this package directly into Unity and run a sample Myo application. It's very easy to get started. The next thing I wanted to highlight is this list of unofficial tools and language bindings. Here you'll see a whack load of bindings that work with the Myo. So if you're not happy working with C++ in the original Windows and Mac SDK, you can work with other languages using these bindings. For example, if you want to do a web application and you want to work with JavaScript, you can go ahead and click into myo.js and then have a look at this. It has full documentation. It's very easy to build out web applications using this tool. So now that the download is complete, I'm going to go ahead and double click on this to open up the SDK. I'm going to open up that application, and the first folder I'm going to go to is the bin folder. In here you're going to find the 2 sample applications pre-built for you. So you can go ahead and run these applications to get a sense of the data that you're working with. So first off, on the far right column here, you're going to see the pose data. So right now you can see it says unknown. You'll also notice that it says locked. The reason why it says that is because the Myo is waiting for you to double tap, perform the double tap gesture to unlock it. From there you'll start to read in the pose data. So I'm going to go ahead and double tap, and I want you to notice the pose window that shows up down here. So I double tap and all of a sudden it turns unlocked and you see the small pose window show up here. If I do that again, now if I perform a gesture, for example the wave out gesture, you can not only see the pose detected right here, but it also shows up here as the currently detected pose. If I go back to rest, that changes. I can do, and then it will lock back up again. If I unlock one more time, I can do the wave in gesture. I can spread my fingers, make a fist, and then it will lock back up again. So the next set of data that's interesting to work with is the orientation data. So across these 3 columns, you get to see the roll, pitch, and the yaw respectively. So if I look at the first column, you can see that if I rotate my arm and I roll my wrist, you can see the change there. In the next column, if I change the pitch of my arm, for example, if I raise my hand up to the ceiling or if I bring it down to the ground, you'll see that change there. And finally, you have your yaw. So if I point to the right, it changes, and then if I point to the left, it changes. So this data you can work with in your application to track the movement of your arm. So now that you have a sense of the data that you have to work with, let's dive into the actual code. So going back to the SDK, we can go into the root directory and then from there go into the samples directory. Here we'll find the hellomyo.xcode project. Let's go ahead and open that up. So when we open that up, first thing we want to do is navigate to the hellomyo.c++. This is the actual code. You'll notice that if I go ahead and run this file, down here you can actually see the exact same data that comes through. So for example, if I change my roll, pitch, and yaw, you can see the data updating. It also has all the pose data as well. So if I double tap to unlock, it unlocks and now I can change the pose. You can see the wave out, wave in, rest. So without diving in too much detail, I want to go over some of the main methods that you'll find in the C++ file. The first one is on orientation data. So this method is called whenever the Myo changes orientation, and it passes in the quaternion, which is the definition of the orientation. In most cases, the quaternion is not something that you want to work with, so we've provided the Euler angle calculation to convert that quaternion back to roll, pitch, and yaw. So this outputs radians, and you can then take that and scale it. So for the output down here, we scale it from 0 to 18. The next method that I want to highlight is the onPose method. This is called every time that a pose is changed. So in this case, it passes in the pose. We simply set the current pose to the pose. We can do conditional statements on it. And then in the actual print function, we can just go ahead and change that or print out that pose right there. If you want to build a native Mac application, this is all you need. You can simply take this sample project and build on top of that. Whenever you detect different orientations, you can trigger actions based on the values of roll, pitch, and yaw that you're looking for. Similarly, if you want to trigger actions based on your pose, you can do that in here. So with that, I want to take us back to the Myo Market. So the Myo Market, this is something that we just released, and I'm actually extremely excited. So this allows us to share the applications that we've built, but it also allows third-party developers like yourself to distribute the applications that you build. One application in particular that I'd like to highlight is the Race the Sun. So Race the Sun, it's actually an awesome game. If you haven't tried it before, definitely give it a shot. But I just want to show you how exactly someone built out this application. So what's interesting is that the creators of Race to the Sun themselves did not build out native Myo support into the game. Instead, the developer here built support for the Myo on top of the game. So they built what we call a connector. So a connector simply examines your active window on your operating system, looks for a particular application, in this case Race the Sun, and then once that application is detected, it basically maps your gestures and movements to keyboard and cursor commands. So I'm going to go ahead and download this connector just to show you what I mean. I'm going to save that right there. So now that the download is complete, I'm going to go ahead and double click on this file. And it's going to ask me to install it into the application manager of MyoConnect. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It asked me to replace it. I had an existing one in there, so yep, no problem there. Now I'm going to go into MyoConnect up here in this Myo icon, and I'm going to go into the application manager. So the application manager is where you house all of your connectors. So you'll see PowerPoint is in there, Prezi, Spotify, VLC. So what this means, with these connectors in place, if I were to go into the Keynote or Prezi in my operating system, I will be able to control it automatically using the Myo because of this connector right here. So now I've just added the Race the Sun connector, which means that if I go ahead and run Race the Sun, I can control it using the Myo. So what I want to do, first of all, mention is that you'll notice that here it says View and Finder. Chances are when you're looking at this, it doesn't say that. The reason it says it on my machine is because if I go back into the Myo icon here and I go to Preferences, I can enable developer mode. This is something that you want to do. It makes life a lot easier as a developer when working with connectors. So it's in here right now. I'm going to go ahead and play the game for you guys really quickly. I'm just going to type in Race the Sun. It's going to open it up. So right now, I am actually moving this cursor with the armband. It's really cool. So I go play offline. I simply wave in to select that. I hit play, play, and now I'm playing. So I can make a fist right now to calibrate it. And as I move my arm to the right and left, I can control this. If I spread my fingers, it pauses the game. And if I were to rotate and wave my hand upwards, it would trigger a special move, my jump move. I can also wave my hand outwards, in this case, take control over the cursor and hit the X. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of here just so I can, dive into the actual code instead of just have fun. Okay. So all that showed you was that by having a connector in Myo Connect, I can control Race the Sun with the Myo. So it's really sweet. So how exactly did I do that? To show you how I did that, I'm going to open up Sublime Text 2, and I'll show you what this connector actually looks like. So if I open up the connector, Documents, here we go. It's going to open this up. So you'll see there's no styling right now. That's because of the .myo extension. It's not understood yet by Sublime Text 2. This connector is actually written in Lua. So you can go into View, Syntax, and change that to Lua, and now you should have the appropriate styling. So this is the connector. You'll notice that it's actually not that big. It's only 200 plus lines of code, and this allows you to play Race the Sun, so it's really cool. First thing I want to highlight here is the on foreground window change. This method is called every single time you change the window in your operating system, and it passes in the app and the title. So you can simply match the string. So if you detect Race the Sun in your application title, and you match that up, you can go ahead and run. It would then detect this as your active script and give you control over it. Next is on pose edge. So this method is called whenever the pose is changed on the Myo, and it passes in the pose and the edge. The edge refers to the state of the gesture. So if I squeeze a fist, that's an on edge. As soon as I release the fist, that's the off edge. So in here, for example, if I were to spread my fingers, it's going to call this escape method. If I go to the bottom where this escape method is defined, you'll see that this simply simulates the press of the escape key on the keyboard. Similarly, if I come back up here and I do the wave in and it does this left click method, going back down here, that triggers the left click of the mouse. So you can see in these connectors, you can actually define keyboard presses and cursor clicks as well as control the cursor itself using the Myo very simply with one of these connectors. So that's it. Really, that's what I wanted to highlight in this demo video. It gives you a sense of the data that comes out of the Myo. You have your orientation data, which is the movement of your arm in space. You have your pose data, which is fist, finger spread, all those gestures to work with. And you can use that data to build out native applications in Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android, but you can also control existing applications using these connectors. There's a lot to do here, and there's a lot to discover with the Myo. Make sure you check out our developer portal. The documentation, as I said before, is very thorough. There's a lot in there that can help you out. If you do have any questions, though, make sure you contact me. Again, you can contact me through Twitter there's my handle right there, and you can contact me through email. I should be available, and I'd be more than happy to help out. Best of luck, guys. Can't wait to see the results.